Welcome to the Regina A. Quick Center for the Arts at St. Bonaventure University. For your safety and convenience, please note the exits located at either side of the stage, as well as the exits located behind you. In the event of an emergency, our audience services staff will assist you. At this time, we'd like to remind you that the taking of photographs and the use of recording devices is not permitted. Also, if you are carrying any cell phones or pagers, please turn them off now. We thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the program.
Good afternoon, and welcome to this celebration of our university values of discovery, community, and individual worth. I'm Joe Zimmer, Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs, and it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenters. This event is designed to pay tribute to our university president, Sister Margaret Carney, as she prepares to step down from this role following a distinguished 12-year term of service. Given the manner in which she has championed the Franciscan distinction and character of St. Bonaventure University, we thought it appropriate to set aside some time this reading day to reflect on those values, what they mean for us today, and what they can mean for us in the future. In addition to this packed house of faculty, staff, students, and friends, we have additional guests participating from the loft of the third floor of this building, as well as alumni and friends all over the world who are joining us via the live stream. Welcome, Bona Nation. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's presenters. First is Dr. Xiaoning Zhang, Associate Professor of Biology and Director of the Biochemistry Program. Dr. Zhang will speak about what she's discovered beyond science. Next will be Chris Brown, Director of our first-year Experience in Orientation, and Malika Warsham, hashtag Race Matters Planning Committee member, who will help us to see how the hashtag Race Matters program is an ideal representation of our value of community. Finally, our university president, Sister Margaret Carney, will speak about the value of individual worth and our need to pay increased attention to this somewhat understated pillar of the Franciscan charism. So please welcome Dr. Xiaoning Zhang.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to be a part of a celebration like this. I'm going to talk about discovery and my journey in this discovery with you and share my experience. So first of all, what does discovery look like? Have you thought about it? Is there a handbook for it? You can follow procedures? Probably not. Right? Sometimes you find, you try it and you fail. And sometimes you get surprises. For example, like you shrunk your kids by accident. And then you are persistent. If you really, really want to keep going, you will succeed. So about a few years ago, I started to find that I get very frustrated in the classroom. And that's because I see more and more students, they're not really prepared for the class. And then they also don't show a lot of excitement. And then it doesn't seem like they want to learn a lot. So I was asking, what happened? Is that me? Do I have to change my job? Am I really suited for this? So I'm a scientist, right? So I went to look for evidence, look for facts. What I did was I went to talk to different people in this university and in other universities. I asked them, what did you see in your classroom? What do you feel about your students? Right? Not only undergraduate level, also at the graduate level. Because I want to see what they think out there at the graduate level, are students also prepared or not? So we share the same concern. So it's not just me, right? Then I asked the question, if that is the case, we start with students who are underprepared. Can four-year college still provide the experience and the preparedness so they can meet the requirement when they go out there look for a job? And so this is a constant question in my mind because I want to know that I can prepare my students. So the next step I did was I went to different businesses and I talked to the employers. So I asked them, what do you see in your new employees? What do you expect of them? They have some disappointment too. But at the same time, they also emphasized on a list of core competencies that they expect their employees to have. Just to name a few, as you see on the screen, for example, critical thinking, problem solving, communication, leadership, and teamwork. I don't think this is very specific to STEM, but STEM employers want those too. Okay. So this is the end of the spectrum, what we want students to have so they can have a success in their future career. Then what is the reality? It's far from optimal. Well, why is that? So there are some possibilities I have discovered. For example, maybe students didn't take some actions when opportunities were knocking on the door, right? Maybe they were thinking, well, I can learn that when I'm in college because I know some of my students have similar thoughts. Oh, I can learn that when I go to the next school. I don't have to learn it now, right? So that's one possibility. The other possibility could be, just maybe, they never got a chance to learn those. Opportunities were not there when they were in the K-12 schools. So these are the things I've been considering, I've been thinking back and forth. So if that is the case, what can we do about it? Because the K-12 schools are our supply lines for the future talents. So if we don't help them, we're not helping us. So let's help them, right? So that basically leads to an easy choice among all the three, right? Now here is a problem, so I can do nothing, just watch it, or I can just say, hey, it's not my fault. Or I can say, let's do something together, I want to be a part of the solution. It's not only for the entire system, it's also for my professional satisfaction and my own experience, for my own sake. So these are the things I quickly come to inclusion, saying, this is what I want to do. So I went to look at literatures online and then find out what others have done out there in the world. It's very exciting. So there is a new concept, well, it's not very, very new, but still very new. It's called collective impact. It was published in 2011, then later on very quickly adopted by many of the others who determined to make a difference in the system. So just to show you one example I really like about this model. So once a problem is identified and then people want to make change, so what happens at first? Everybody run around, start doing things, and then there are a lot of chaos. There are a lot of confusions. And then you see people, everybody's busy, but nothing happened, right? A lot of background noise. Then later on, some individual groups started to see success in their effort. However, they act in isolation. So they do their own thing, they have their own success, they have their own goals. Sometimes these goals don't really match together with each other, so they kind of cancel out at the end. That doesn't lead to any big impact. So the third stage is when some groups realize, well, let's align our goals, and then let's coordinate with each other. So you're starting to see some effects. However, those kind of things usually happen when they try to avoid any conflicts with each other. So that's the spirit of it. Here is the aha moment. When people realize they need to collaborate, they need to form a bigger goal, form a bigger team to work together. So that's when the bigger and the stronger impact started to happen faster and then being very effective. This is the direction we want to work toward. And then today, I want to introduce what we have done in the past 18 months in all the science faculties. So we basically came up with this model. It's multidimensional. And I want to give a little bit background as to how we came up with that. So one day I was in a school and then doing my service in the high school curriculum coordinator basically looked at me saying, your university doesn't have a presence here. Being a new chair at the time, it hurts. You know, it sounds like you're not doing your job. So I looked back to him and said, maybe it's the past. It's going to change from now. I made a promise, basically. And then I came back, I was like, well, what can I do to make it happen? So I started talking to different faculty members in the science department. And then we basically came up with this model. So in this model, you are seeing 3 events, and then they are dependent of each other. Okay? So at the beginning, we have a spring science fair. So that is with the intention to boost the interest in all the students in STEM in this area. So we're focusing on Western New York and beyond, but then here is our base. So once the students come here, they see a bigger community. They see, okay, they're not alone if they really like to do science. And then they get more excited. But when they go home, we want to keep the excitement going and get bigger. So what we do is we work with their teachers. We say, what do you need us to help? So we help with the resource. We help with curriculum redesign. And then we're still doing it. Because they are the ones interacting with kids, get them excited every day. And then we need to support them. Although we have done these, we also recognize it's going to take years for curriculum to change. It's a lot of work. So at the same time, students are graduating from high school. We need to help them too, especially the ones who are so interested in STEM, but they've never had much of experience. They don't know what it is. So we want to give them some reality check. So that's when we invite them to campus for research experience in the science labs, working with the science faculty members alongside for 2 weeks. And we also invited a variety of the career speakers talking about their field of experience and giving advice to those high schoolers. So I'm going to give you a promising statement that I feel like after we have done this for 1 year is, yes, it is possible for us to continue doing this, and it is possible for 4-year colleges to provide the support and experience to produce qualified graduates for the future employees in the STEM. So now I'm going to show you some data. So we have 2 years of data from Science Fair. As you can see, from last year to this year, we have a huge increase in student participation. This year, we got almost 100. So that's great. At least they are here, they see they are part of the community, they get excited. I think that's very, very important. And then Dr. Dave Hume was a great organizer for this, and he's great. So that is the science fair. Then in the summer, last year, we had 11 teachers from 6 different schools in this area. They came, and then we did workshop with them, and then we did different lab development with them. That is because in the high schools and middle schools, they are really, really weak in their lab supplies. And then, so they need a lot of help on that, and then we see that's where we need to be. And then at the end, we did the research program with 8 local students. At the end, they all presented what they have learned, what they have done with the bigger community. And we were very fortunate to have the US Senator, to have the state senator and the House rep being there with us to celebrate with the students. Students were excited. Some of them burst into tears, and then that matters. So with all these being done, we thought, well, you know, what do we go from here? We don't want to be just celebrating this small success and then be done with it. We need to continue. We need to build on this energy and then make it going forward more and more and involve more people on this. So what we did was we set up an outreach website. So if you go to www.sbu.edu, you mouse over About SBU, you will see a list of topics. The second from bottom is a link you want to click. That will lead you to all the STEM outreach programs and also a list of the summer camps that are available. So you can access any information we put out there to share with anybody who's interested. And then if you want to contact us and want to collaborate, we can always do that. So the summer camps are something new we just started. As I said, it's a discovery process. So we hope for the best, right? So let's see what we're going to get. So that's only one of the future leads that we're working on. So there are some other promising leads we're following. For example, this is not just a concern of Western New York. It's not just for New York State. It is for the United States, for the entire world. Use my dear colleague's quote, Chuck Walker's. This area, we are rich in poverty. I really love it. And it's true, right? And it's nothing to be ashamed about. This is what it is. What are we going to do with it? And then I look into what supports could be there. And then the National Science Foundation recently put out a call for ideas and proposals to support diversity development, including the people with low socioeconomic status in STEM education. And then we responded. I don't know the result yet. I hope they like it. I hope we can make it bigger. And then I know some other places in Western New York, they want to collaborate with us because they see the promise. And then another lead I'm following is I've been talking to some of the STEM employers in this area in Western New York to see if we can work with them, also with the K-12 schools, that we can achieve this collective impact. It's not just for me, it's not just for Bonaventure, it's for everybody. So at the end, we will see kids get better education, they find better job, they make an outstanding career. And then the community gets supported. So these are the promise I can see. And then now you look at what happens out there. Here, you have K-12 education who are struggling. And then on the other end, you see the STEM employers and the professional schools, graduate schools. They're looking at employees. They're like, I wish. There is a gap. We have to mind the gap. And then what we can do as the college, we can be the bridge. And then we need to extend this bridge beyond what we have done in order to mind this gap, to help students go very safely from one end to the other. I hope by now you have seen I made my choice. And I believe everybody have many choices, and it's only you can decide what you want to choose. And then there is a role for everybody in building this bridge. It doesn't matter who you are, in what kind of occupation you are in what age you are in, what gender you are in, anything. So if you are interested, you can be a part of this bridge. Please choose it. Thank you.
Malika and I are really fortunate and lucky to be part of this conversation as we talk about the celebration of our value of community. And when we began to plan this talk, Malika and I looked at the value statement, the piece on our university website that defines our definition and describes what we mean when we say community. And three things really stood out to us, and the three things that we wanted to focus on today is the fact that diversity makes our community stronger. That it's not a weakness, it's not a challenge, it's a strength to our community. The next is that community and the diversity within it improves the quality of life for those who are in the community. And the last is our calling going forward, that we need to take this spirit of community and move forward and manifest it wherever we go outside of the Bonaventure community, outside of the grounds and the boundaries of the Bonaventure bubble. So by taking a hard look at how we define our sense of community, Malek and I hope to share the story of Race Matters. And by telling that story, we want you to see a little bit more of how we've come to understand the strengths, the challenges, the opportunities, and our calling forward to strengthen our university family.
So to kind of get in the mindset, we decided that we want to share a quote with you guys from Desmond Tutu. If you're in a neutral situation of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has his foot on the tail of a mouse and you say that you're neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. Again, if an elephant has his foot on the tail of a mouse and you say that you're neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. If we just take a moment to really think about what he's saying along with this image.
So one of the reasons that this visual really stood out to us is that when we were looking at celebrating the value of our community, we realized that we needed to pay attention to where the mice are in our community. And by introducing the diversity of our community as one of our strengths, we also had to see who was vulnerable and whose voices were being silenced.
So my first year here at Bonas, America was in a racial tension. There's a lot going on. I remember while I was in the lobby of my lounge, we were watching the Baltimore situation, and students would say, "This is why white people think black people are thugs." I remember watching the Eric Gardner situation and students saying, "Black people don't respect police officers." And I especially remember when they said, "Black people should stop being lazy." I remember at orientation that everyone was claiming about this Bona family and how amazing it was and how it was a great community. But then I come here and I hear my peers saying this about people who look like me. I didn't really want to be a part of a community that viewed me as a thug, as disrespectful, or as lazy. So I was really torn, and I kind of felt like I didn't have anywhere to go or anyone to talk to about this because I wanted to be a part of this community, but kind of felt like the community was turning their back on me. And I had really no faculty or staff member to go to. And it was just a really uncomfortable situation to be in my first year, 6 hours away from home.
So when we started to hear feedback from our students, and those stories that Maleka talked about really emerged as conversations about racial tensions throughout the nation were prevalent in the national conversation, we also needed to have a gut check about what was going on inside the bubble, within the Bona family. And while we might gloss over some of the strengths and the amazing strengths that we bring together in this community, it doesn't detract from the fact that when we look at the mirror and we start to see the shortcomings, if we can have a critical identification of what those challenges are within the Bona family and how we can take steps to improve them, it becomes vitally important. Now, in addition to the stories and the facts that Maleka was sharing and the fact that that was being talked about regularly throughout the campus, we had several tipping points in the spring of 2015. And some of that tension in the national conversation boiled over into the university community. First, after our celebration of Martin Luther King Jr. Day, when the artistic representation of MLK's commitment to justice was vandalized in our chapel. And later on in that same semester, there was a very insensitive tweet that went out criticizing students of color and people who were involved in the protests in Baltimore. So both of those events highlighted some of the significant challenges and how they were playing out here in the university.
So our first response to the tweet was to have a floor meeting. We had a campus dialogue, and we had an individual mediation. As we kind of went through these three processes, we discovered that my story wasn't the only story on campus, and that several people of color felt this uncomfortableness and had plenty of stories they wanted to tell. So when we started to pull back the layers, we realized as a Bonaventure community, we had to address this issue head on, and we can no longer shy away from it.
So like Maleka said, it wasn't just the message of the tweet. And if somebody were to tell me that I've done a year's worth of programs on Race Matters because of a tweet that was sent out, I would tell them that they're foolish. To be able to see that what that tweet represented and how much that has been embedded in the culture of America and in the culture, therefore, of the university community, we saw that the floodgates were opened. And so this series of programs was not just to undo the damage that the tweet and the vandalism did to our community, but also start to rectify some of the damage that has been done by a long pattern of silencing of voices within our community. I remember having a conversation with Sister Margaret after one of our campus-wide forums, and she asked me after that conversation, why has this not reached me yet? Why haven't I heard these stories and how often these are happening to our students at the campus? And I realized in part I needed to take some responsibility for not elevating those concerns above me. To be able to hear some of them and to try to work with students to fix them wasn't enough. And by highlighting the amount of communication it would be necessary to bring these concerns to the top leader in our organization, and the benefit that we had by having a leader like Sister Margaret to then turn around and give us a charge. The charge was to start to explore ways that we can address this issue. We weren't going to sweep it under the rug, we weren't going to ignore it, we weren't going to try to squelch it, but we were going to invite the campus into a dialogue to take action. So the group was called together to begin the planning process. And as the group began to brainstorm, one of the key elements of the people who were at the table was the variety of faces that were at the table. It wasn't just representatives of the Board of Trustees, or just the president, or just the student government, or other student representatives. But we had people from our residential education department, the Damietta Center for Multicultural Student Affairs, faculty from sociology, philosophy, sports studies, School of Education, administrators from university ministries, myself from the first year experience department, and many others at the table gathered together. And it took that level to draw on the strength of our networks and the strengths of our communities to really, in earnest, begin our work together.
So what did we learn in the process of setting up Race Matters? One of the main issues was the honest communication. People of color felt like there was nowhere for them to go and express their feelings and their concerns about what was really going on at St. Bonaventure. The other thing we learned is all members of the community really played an important part in this role. We didn't just want faculty to be on the staff of Race Matters, we wanted everyone to be well represented on this board of Race Matters.
And the last lesson that I think I especially learned was the value of knowing when it's time to speak up and when it's time to sit back and listen. And in the process of both planning and executing Race Matters, I found it extremely valuable to know when I needed to shut my own mouth and listen to the experiences of our students and the experiences of people who do not share my background. And so in doing that, we needed to be willing to take chances. Now, one of the first chances, one of the first risks that we faced in programming towards these issues was in the selection of our All Bonaventure Reads text. And for those of you who aren't familiar with All Bonaventure Reads, it's the book that all freshmen receive during the summer. They're asked to read it over the course of the summer and write reflections on it. And then it serves as a core of their first year experience program, both in University 101 and in co-curricular programming. And in choosing Brian Stevenson's text, Just Mercy, this year, we took a risk. We took a risk in selecting a book that highlighted experiences that the majority of our students do not understand or do not share. But at the same time, we took a risk in exposing our students to stories that were underrepresented to really explore how racial inequities affect our criminal justice system. The next risk that we took was actually naming the series of programming that the All Bonaventure Reads book was a part of. And when we named it Race Matters, that was another challenge.
So why did we name it Race Matters? When you say Race Matters, it affirms that Black lives matters, Hispanic, Latina, Latino lives matter. You're saying that Asian Pacific Islanders lives matters. You're saying that Native American lives matters. As a person of color and a female, my identity has always been aware of at St. Bonaventure. It has been an uphill battle making this community more inclusive and, most importantly, committed to diversity and equity. Our community has a long way to go before we can say we can look beyond race and ethnicity. How can we ignore the fact that this country has been in existence for roughly 400 years? And out of that 400 years, 50 years, people of color have had legal rights. How can we say that race doesn't matter when high schools, colleges, and universities still ignore the contribution of people of color, as well as the history of racism and oppression in America. How can we not see race or ethnicity when so many of the faces in the poorest sections of the poorest cities are the darkest, and the face of those with the highest positions of power are the lightest? If you believe race does not matter in America, you're wearing a powerful and a dangerous blindfold. Only education can remove this. This is why we chose the name Race Matters.
And when we say that race matters, we're not trying to say that we believe that race should matter. In an ideal world, we know that racial identity would not cause disparate impacts for our communities of color. But by exploring ways that race does matter in society today, we start to discover and we start to understand, and then we can begin to take action. So my life in the process of discovering more about the Race Matters program has been significantly improved. I have come to know the stories and the struggles and the joys of our students. And by being able, like I said, to take a step back and listen, I've been able to improve my own quality of life here at the university.
And as a person of color, seeing your university do a campaign like Race Matters, it kind of felt like the university was willing to meet me halfway. It felt like they were finally willing to listen to my voice and to hear my struggles. And it also felt like they were willing to acknowledge the fact that I do have struggles because I am a person of color. It was like the university finally validated our struggles and acknowledged the fact that here at St. Bonaventure, we too struggle with racial issues.
So in attempting to improve the quality of life of the entire campus community, the Race Matters program really sought to bring people into dialogue. As you can see just with the logo of the Race Matters program, that dialogue bubble, the conversations that happen around issues of race is fundamentally important. And so that civil dialogue series that was hosted by the Residential Education Department was one of those key ways that we were able to unpack that, to allow students to have opportunities to talk about these issues, to take a risk, to take a chance, maybe even to be wrong, maybe to be misunderstood, but to at least have the conversation. One of the things that we look at when we look at developing curriculum and the way students learn is some of the work that Emily Stile has done with the National SEED Project. If you're not familiar with the SEED Project, it stands for Seeking Educational Equity and Diversity. And Emily writes a lot about the concept of curriculum being a series of windows and mirrors. That if as a student, if I'm going to learn, I need to be able to look through windows. I need to be able to see beyond myself to something that is foreign, to something that is not true to me. So that's how I'm going to learn something new. I also need to be able to see mirrors in my curriculum. I need to be able to see myself represented in the things that I learn, to be able to see things that I can relate to and things that I can call back on my own experiences, so that it's a combination of feeling comfort and being stretched. And as a white man, in my educational history, I've had a lot of mirrors. When I look at the history that was taught, the literature that I read, I see a lot of people who look like me and share my background. And sometimes in the Race Matters program, we brought in controversial speakers. And those speakers challenged us to think, even if we did not agree. And I came to realize that sometimes the discomfort with the message of our speakers, the discomfort around the topics that were discussed, are discomfort with windows. And that as a white man, I've not been asked to look through windows and look beyond my experience to understand something else. But in providing mirrors for our students of color, we're able to bring that balance of windows and mirrors together in the educational process.
So the success of Race Matters was because of several things. One was because we already had an established community. Like Chris pointed out before, we had a diverse group of faculty members and other employees of St. Bonaventure that were willing to tackle this issue on this campus. The second reason why it was so successful was because of the attendance. It wasn't just freshmen who showed up, it was sophomores, juniors, it was faculty, it was even other members of the Olean and Allegheny community showed up to show how important Race Matters really is. Without the collaboration of everyone in the community we already had built on, Race Matters never would have been as successful as it was.
And to measure that success, right now we have a lot of anecdotal evidence. We have a lot of stories and conversations that come out of the workshops and the different speakers that we've brought to campus. We hear a lot of things happening in conversations in the residence halls and the dining hall. And we also have opportunities for formal assessments of ongoing progress in how we've enhanced the quality of life of our Bonaventure community. And if you're an undergraduate student in the audience today, make sure that you take the survey that came out to your email about the diversity, culture, climate survey, and that's part of our efforts to give ongoing assessment about the quality of life on campus. So please do make sure you take that today. We also have the opportunity, as we move forward, in addition to assessment, to take these issues wherever we go, outside of the Bonaventure community, outside of the physical grounds of the university. We have a lot of challenges moving forward. And Malika and I would like to highlight, as we move forward and as we progress in our understanding of racial issues and how that impacts our community, we have 5 challenges we'd like to issue today. And the first challenge is to the institution of St. Bonaventure. As an institution, we need to make sure that we don't lose the ground that we gained this year. We need to continue taking advantage of the strategic planning process so that these conversations and these topics are institutionalized, that it's not just a committee of willing, committed, and interested folks hosting programs and events, but it's part of the very fabric of the university. We cannot lose ground. We need to continue the progress that we've made so far.
Our second challenge is to make sure that we continue to hire staff of diverse backgrounds. It's really important that our faculty and our staff members are just as diverse as our student body. Especially as a woman and a person of color, not having anyone to go to as a mentor plays a huge role in my everyday life. Because unfortunately, in the world we live in today, it is very hard for a white woman to tell me how to be successful. And as of right now, our staff does not show this diverse as the world is. And when we talk about bringing diversity, it's in all aspects of St. Bonaventure. It's in res life, it's in our professors, it's in FYE, it's in our administrative staff. We need to make sure that we continue to bring in more diverse group of people. And not just bring them here, but make sure they're happy and that our Bona family really shows them that they're welcoming and that we love them and that we want them to stay here.
Our third challenge is a challenge to those who are outside of the campus community. A challenge to our alumni and our friends and our local community. One of the lessons that we learned is when we posted on the university's Facebook page this picture of our students supporting students of color at the University of Missouri. And on that Facebook post, there was a lot of positive and a lot of negative feedback about the intentions and the actions of our students and the statement that they were making. And in that process, it reminded us that we owe our university community at large, our alumni and our friends and our local community, the respect to continue to educate them about what's going on our campus and how these racial issues of identity and justice affect our students' day-to-day experiences. So we have opportunities to take advantage of the presidential phonecast, the alumni magazine, and email newsletters to keep our alumni community involved so that we can continue to challenge our alumni especially to be partners in seeking justice, to be able to use their power that they have in their social lives and their professional lives to help see diversity as a strength and improve the quality of life for the communities they now find themselves.
Our fourth challenge is to make sure that our curriculum is diverse. We want to make sure that we incorporate these themes into our curriculum because we can't just rely on co-curricular activities like Race Matters to educate our students about these issues, especially since Race Matters is a voluntary event and not everyone has to go to. We want to make sure that when we as Bona students are learning, that we're not just learning about European history or MLK, as great as he was, but about everyone. We want to make sure that before you graduate St. Bonaventure, that you know some of the issues, racially and culturally, that other members of our community face every day.
And our fifth and final challenge is a challenge to each individual who's here today, each individual in our campus community. We need to recognize that we have done a lot. We've made a lot of progress on our campus so far, but there's worlds of places where we can still go. There's a lot more work ahead of us. And the reason behind that is that this isn't just something we can be average at. It's not something that we can be okay at doing. This is the core of our values. If we say our respect for community is fundamental to who we are as St. Bonaventure University, then we are called to greatness in this category. We need to respect our community, and we have a calling to respect the diversity within that community as fundamental elements that strengthen it. So to wrap up our presentation, I wanted to share a quote from Brian Stevenson, who is the author of our All Bonaventure Reads text. And the quotation says, "You cannot understand the most important things from a distance. You have to get close." You have to get close. We need to get close to issues on diversity in our community because it's one of those very important things. If Malaika or any other student of color feels marginalized or silenced, that is important. It's important to my work and my calling as an administrator and as a member of the Bonaventure community.
As you can see from this picture, from a distance, you can't see the mice. You don't know if his life is in danger. If we don't get close, we miss the dangers faced by people who are being oppressed, which damages our community. As you can see the picture, you don't really know if the mouse life is in danger. This is why we challenge you to continue getting close to this topic, to get to know and respect the dignity of each person in our community, so that our Bona family is strengthened by diversity here on campus and wherever we go.
Thank you.
I came back here to teach. I had spent the last 23 years previous to that down in Washington, D.C. But all of a sudden, when President Bob Wickenheiser had to resign, literally the Board of Trustees met on a Sunday. They called me up about 20 to 6 and said, "We're asking you to take the position of president." And I said, "When are you going to announce this?" They said 7 o'clock. So this was on the 7 o'clock news. So this was a fast transition. But when they asked me to become interim president, they also appointed Sister Margaret as senior vice president for the Franciscan mission of the school. And that was good because actually Margaret had much more administrative experience than I did.
Dominic was a very calming person. Margaret at that time was kind of the executive behind the scene. He was the front man. Margaret was the person in the back room, and that was very, very, very successful.
When I left office, Margaret gave me a little figurine. It was 2 dolphins standing upright. This was a symbol of her and me, you know, that shake it up and the waters rage, but somehow the two of us managed to keep bobbing up and staying afloat. And that was a symbol of the crisis in some ways that we went through in those first months.
She refers many times to Thomas Plasman, who had to rebuild the university after the horrible fire. She had to rebuild the university from the tragedy of the scandal we had.
We were facing a daunting task on a number of fronts, and I think those tasks could have intimidated a person of lesser courage and confidence.
When I was chairman of the board, one of my toughest challenges was to get her to slow down every once in a while, to get her to take a vacation, which even though she was supposed to be on vacation, she was back on campus for a day. People would comment on how they'd go by at 10 o'clock at night and the light would be on in her office. She led by being with people. She was at events, she was at faculty meetings, and that wasn't just for show when the board was there. I mean, people told me that's how she was all the time.
I think what will remain most of all is simply the heritage of the way she works with people. That's one of the things is very clear in the rule of life that she helped write for contemporary Franciscans, is the way Franciscans interact with people. And I think Margaret certainly embodies that style of leadership.
Sister Margaret is the type of leader where she never looks back. When she finds direction, she wants to focus on that, and she wants to move forward. She doesn't dwell in the past.
As the ship stabilized and her leadership took us beyond that, we faced the challenge of rebuilding a university, of redefining campus life in a very positive way and enhancing the university both at the academic level and in the student life level.
The way she handles the students and the alumni is remarkable in that she is in the center of them all the time.
Sister Margaret! Sister Margaret! Sister Margaret!
She is a woman of immense personal charm and could relate to students, to most of the faculty, to alumni and donors. I mean, it is impossible not to like Sister Margaret.
My very first exposure with Sister Margaret, before I joined the board, I'll never forget it. I will never forget it. I remember going into her office and saying, "Sister, listen, I'm busy, I'm traveling all over the place. I don't want to join a board unless we're doing real work on this board." And she quickly told me with this little smile that she has, "Oh, Bob, we're doing real work here." And lo and behold, what kind of work this woman was doing was absolutely unbelievable.
She and I are the same age, and I have gone up to campus and I said, "Where's Margaret?" And they said, "Well, she's got 2 meetings in Buffalo and a luncheon, and she'll be back down here for your 3 o'clock meeting." So obviously she had to leave at the crack of dawn.
For example, if you drive with her and you miss your exit or you miss your turn, even though it would take 2 minutes to turn around and go back, she'll make you go forward and just continue on to your destination somewhere else, because she never looks back, and that's not in a bad way. It's really a metaphor for her life. So I tell people when they drive her, if you miss your exit, you're gonna keep going straight.
She was resolute, and I think gradually slowed down, kind of a millimeter over the time that we worked together.
I think we all know about her energy level. How many of you have gotten the handwritten note from Sister Margaret, right? How many of you have gotten that note? And you say to yourself, when does she find the time to do this? For all the people, when does she find the time to do the little things that make people really care and believe in this university?
I remember it was the first semester of my freshman year here, and unfortunately my family endured the tragic loss of a dear loved one. I remember being at the funeral home and in walked Sister Margaret. She didn't know who my relative was, but she knew that my family was hurting. She was there to show her love, support, her prayers, her condolences, and it was at that moment that I knew that she was more than an administrator. She truly loves her students here, and I'm forever grateful to her.
She connected to the people because they needed to feel the warmth and the care and the Franciscan leadership, the Franciscan Catholic leadership that she brought. That skill, that unique skill that she has, that did come natural to her.
In doing this, there is another recognition that I am compelled to make this afternoon.
I think those of us who have heard her speak know that she carries an eloquence of expression that is not found in many men and women in leadership capacities. She may be the best public speaker I've ever seen in my life.
Every single time we went out to raise money, I always thought I could tell the story well about what we needed and why we needed it. But Sister Margaret would get up and they'd want to give her the money as soon as she left the stage because she was so compelling of a speaker. And really one of the skills that I saw of her was her compelling way of speaking to people. Her ability to make the board understand the legacy, the deep Franciscan Catholic tradition and heritage we stand on, and all the shoulders that we stand on in terms of what built this university. She always brings us back to, why are we here? What's our purpose? Who did the work before us? If they got through this, we can get through this.
During the time of Margaret's presidency at the university, we began to use the word extraordinary to describe the transformation that the university brings about in the life of its students. I think the word extraordinary really applies to what Margaret's accomplished. Margaret, my friend, you restored our belief in our capacity to achieve and to suspend disbelief in challenging times. I think this is the legacy of your presidency and what historians will comment when they write of it.
Hopefully, if we can go back to Assisi with her as a retired president, it'll be a calm, relaxed, educational, and we'll be able to have a few glasses of wine together and toast her and everything else. So that's what I'd like.
My message to Sister Margaret would be to continue to serve in the way you have served and continue to be the strong woman that she is, and to give her gifts and talents and the new roles that the Lord is calling her to do.
St. Bonaventure University is your home. That's where you belong. It is your home. So when you get done with your sabbatical, we're here with open arms to make sure you come back and you continue to be a driving influence for this university. Thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you. It was a Christmas Eve, and I was home in Pittsburgh, ready to leave for Christmas Eve supper with the sisters of my religious community when the phone rang, stopping me on my way out the door. I decided I'd better take the call, and I was very surprised to find on the other end our dispatcher here in security telling me that a call had just come through from a gentleman, an alumni member who was clearly quite disturbed and very urgently in need of speaking to me, and could I please return the call? My heart sank. It was 5 o'clock, and what could be so pressing on Christmas Eve? But I recognized the name of a dear alum whom I had gotten to know and with whom I had corresponded, and I made the call, and the message that I received from Joe was this: Sister Margaret, I'm calling because today my beloved wife, Marcy, died. She's gone home to heaven. And Sister Margaret, I have no family left here. She had no family out here on the West Coast where we lived, and I didn't know who to turn to, so I'm calling my Bonaventure family. Sister Margaret, I'm calling you to tell you that Marcy's gone and to ask you to pray for me and for my broken heart. What kind of school creates that kind of bond that 40 or 50 years does not only not erase, but strengthens into that kind of familial sense? In the week since I announced my decision to retire, I've hardly had a time of quiet contemplation of the last 20 years of my service. But at moments, I am pulled by powerful memories, lightning flashes of flashback, to times that create a mosaic of which I may write someday. And if I do, I will be tempted to steal the title used by Anne Morrow Lindbergh in her autobiography, which tells of the combination of celebrity and tragedy that made up her life. Her title, Hours of Gold, Hours of Lead. In these reflections, the common thread of all of the stories about people like Joe, is the common thread of individual worth. It emerges over and over. And today I would like to take that value as a lens to focus first on our past, but more important, to offer a framework by which to construct our future. And throughout, I'm trying to answer a question. How do we understand this value of individual worth as a constituent element of our identity? And do we really believe that it is something so primal and pervasive, irreplaceable, without parallel in our understanding of ourselves as an institution? In 2003, this university was indeed shaken to the core by a scandal that left us reeling and asking, how did that happen here? But did we take all of the needed steps to insulate ourselves against repeated failures? Now, the work of answering that question, how did this happen, did take place in two official stages. The first, an internal investigation that left no stone unturned in the search for answers. The second was the NCAA investigation, which built upon the first work, but which frankly failed to shine a clear light on the entire scope of the problem. I will never forget an evening during the time of those double investigations, during which the business faculty had gathered with our Franciscan Institute faculty doing our Pacioli project study. As we talked about these things over dinner, it was Larry Orsini who posed the challenge. He said, "We're all getting a lot of satisfaction out of blaming the former president, But what about our own responsibility during these years? How did each of us use his or her authority to speak up, to point out problems of governance, of authoritarian overreach? Or did we contribute to this problem by our silence? We are all responsible for the life of this community, he reminded us. What can we learn from this? What must we learn from this? More recently, our colleague, Father David Couturier, has reminded the readers of his new book on Franciscans and finances that scandals that erupt at the top echelons of trusted religious organizations are almost always preceded by an erosion of vigilance and accountability at lower levels that is tolerated until the moral fabric is too weakened to stand up to the machinations of those who hold executive or even sacral power. And so looking back, we have to ask, in how many ways have we contributed to failures that have happened in our community? The failure to place respect for individuals at the front and center of all we do. But with the past as prologue, how can we move to a future of mission-centered strength? We are currently engaged in a very productive and energizing effort to create a new strategic plan. This value and other key values are being reinforced in that work. But do we in fact believe that this core has to be protected and that it is the calling of every single person who commits to membership here? You know, we continually excuse ourselves from the obligation of saying clearly what fuels our identity and our mission, and we act as though it's perfectly acceptable. We speak of that something special that is Bonaventure. We say apologetically that it's so hard to put it into words, but you just know it when you see it and experience it. That this works as a definition for pornography in a court of law should give us pause, don't you think? We may be thinking of it as something magical like pixie dust, or something organic like DNA, or a spiritual evangelical charism. It may be that which creates the Bona bubble, or for those looking through truly rose-tinted glasses, a Bonatopia. But today I ask seriously, is our inability to give clear, accurate language to this value really a fear that if we state it so clearly, we will have no excuse for violating its demands? We have to be willing to give attention to this. Our nation is experiencing a serious attention deficit disorder in our public and civic life. We see this in our young and their hunger for affirmation at an existential level, reflected sadly right now in the opioid epidemic and their nihilistic conviction that life can be cut off any minute by the bomb or bullet of a terrorist. These young seekers after meaning and hope are our subject. They are our workload. They are our precious, precious students. We are also seeing a vulgarization of our public discourse and relationships, not by street gangs in poverty-stricken neighborhoods, but on the platforms of a presidential campaign. Has this stunned us into asking new questions as citizens? Am I an accomplice to this form of civic ADHD? When I addressed our faculty recently upon my concerns as I leave office, they affirmed my lament that even the social fabric of this campus has weakened considerably, and that the work of repairing it cannot come from a president's pen. It has to be the village, the neighborhood, the human commons that we create as Bonnies. Community isn't created by establishing committees and task forces, though, when well devised, they do contribute. Community is created when we break bread together and share the daily life as neighbors in concrete ways. The potluck supper, the child care offer, the visit to the funeral home, the lifting word on a tough day. In our search for models and vocabulary to describe the importance of individual worth, I suggest that we would find help in the brilliant introductory essay of David Brooks' new work, The Road to Character. In this book, David Brooks outlines the difference between resume virtues and eulogy virtues. The former are the ones by which we want to be known as we craft careers, build our successful selves, and look for that elusive 15 minutes of fame. The latter, the eulogy virtues, speak to the core of our being, the essential person the mourners will remember at our funerals. He relates these ideas to the notion of a nature split between the personas of Adam 1 and Adam 2. In Adam 1, we see the young, the ambitious, self-centered nature that hopes to create and produce and be admired. But we reach Adam 2 when we become the mature, centered self that seeks a moral compass and a life in obedience to a transcendent truth. Adam 1 wants to conquer the world. Adam 2 wants to obey a calling to serve that world. Brooks writes many chapters that outline the development of a variety of persons as different as General George Marshall and Dorothy Day. And the subjects of those portraits he describes in this way. They're a diverse set, none of them even close to perfect, but they practiced a mode of living that is less common now. They were acutely aware of their own weaknesses, and they waged an internal struggle against their sins and emerged with a measure of self-respect. And when we think of them, it is not primarily what they accomplished, but who they became. And he closes by saying, I'm hoping their examples will fire this fearful longing we all have to be better. His book then goes on to give us a gallery of studies of men and women whose individual worth was not some God-given miracle, but the slow, sacrificial quest, a lifetime of surrender to a deep calling. Back to my question. How does commitment to individual worth shape our community of teacher scholars, of professionally credentialed administrators, of our hardworking and accountable support staff, and the companions we meet every day, serving us in Hickey, cleaning our rooms, tending our gardens, shoveling our snow? Is the capacity for seeing this worth inherited or learned, nature or nurture, a set of good manners, or a practice that demands costly self-knowledge? Can we be certain enough of the centrality of this commitment that we are willing to constantly measure ourselves on how it informs our relationship to every student, undergrad and graduate, traditional and non-traditional, online, domestic or international, fully ready for the classroom, or clearly in need of the assistance that is within our power to provide, mainstream or marginal? Can we be certain enough of the centrality of this value to follow the electrifying example of a Pope Francis who simply by meeting people where they are in what he calls the field hospital of a wounded world, give 21st century flesh to an ancient wisdom? Can we be certain enough of the centrality of this value that we would spend the same amount of time trying to form what Martin Luther King called the beloved community that does not ignore diversity, critical engagement, tough discipline, but first and foremost seeks sufficient time, space, and resource to turn the ideals of brotherhood and sisterhood into an inclusive collegial membership. In such a membership, the norm of discourse would be appreciative inquiry in place of inquisitorial accusation. The verbal grenades lobbed via cyberspace from a safe distance would be considered a violation of our standards and treated as such. The rush to suspicious judgment on any and all matters would be supplanted by a commitment to ethical participation in the discourse that forms the polis, the place of true political creativity, which might, after all, be a good definition of a very good university. This value of respect for the individual can be the boast of many a fine secular institution, and in fact, there are many which place this at the center. To belong to such an institution is to be invited, to be formed, to be held accountable for manifesting loyal attachment to mission, to grow over time into a wise mentor and elder, leading others to that same attachment. At times, we speak and act as though we had no other ground or motive than those other institutions for this claim. But I would have failed in my duty in this final address to my campus if I did not underscore with all the conviction that I can summon that we stand within a resource. We stand within a wisdom tradition that was born of the Franciscan philosophical and theological genius that flowered in the 13th and 14th centuries. What we possess and must either embrace or lose is a truth that emanated from the wonderful intuitions, first of a Francis of Assisi, then reflected in the major theological studies of Bonaventure of Bonaventure, and finally in a dramatic breakthrough of intellect in John Duns Scotus of Oxford and Paris. And that insight is none other than this: that every created being, every human being in particular, is a unique, irreplaceable, never to be repeated expression, communication of the divine being, the Creator. Sometimes in our preoccupation with human nature, we may think of ourselves as people punched out of a cosmic mold, set down over and over willy-nilly in a confusing universe stumbling to a baffling end. But no, it is ours to understand that every person carries a singular message of the meaning of God's self, continuing the gift that came into humanity in the person of Jesus Christ, revealing this good intention of God by his becoming a part of that race, a part of the glory of man and woman, fully alive, to quote St. Irenaeus. This, for us, is the key to the entire enterprise of Abrahamic belief. That we are not thrown into the world, into a meaningless reality whose destiny is unknowable, but that we are given in the deepest recesses of our being a divinely installed GPS leading us forward on a good journey through knowledge, through service, and yes, at times through suffering, to fulfillment. And that what we do between the receiving of this gift and the handing back of it in death is what an older dictionary would call salvation. Today's dictionaries may use other terms, but the saving of us and the spending of us in joy and hope is what this is all about. This is what grounds us. This is where we stand as the leading Franciscan University of North America. That this dedication to individual worth cannot be reduced to a marketing slogan or next year's t-shirt. That we must see it as a calling within the world that we normally describe simply as my job, my work, my assignment. Today in the Christian calendar, we celebrate not only Cinco de Mayo, but Ascension Thursday. Our scriptures remind us that for 40 days after his resurrection, Jesus of Nazareth proved in multiple encounters with his closest friends that his humanity had been liberated from death and was now manifesting a new creation outside the boundaries of all that we know of time and space. He finished his work and he disappeared from their presence on this day. And as they stood speechless, gazing after him, two strangers approach and begin scolding. Stop staring. Get going. You've got work to do. Share this news with anybody who will listen. He came that you might understand that your life is sacred and that you are meant for a glorious destiny, not a violent struggle ending in the void of nothingness. Good news, wouldn't you say? Well, your job is to make that known. And that newsflash, my friends, is the beginning of the Christian enterprise down to the present. But these beliefs are not exclusive or exclusionary, and it has always been our work at St. Bonaventure to invite all persons of goodwill, whatever their faith dimension, to be stakeholders in sharing this very optimistic anthropology with the next generation. As a university founded on this intellectual inheritance, it is our job to infuse our work with the optimism that the journey is good because its origins and its destination are encircled in a divine milieu. This year, the people of Ireland are remembering the Easter Rising of 1916. In that, a small band of revolutionaries tried and failed and were executed for attempting to create a new free government on Erin's Green Isle. One of them, Padraig Pearse, left a poem that describes the yearning to give actual form to the dreams of human possibilities, dreams such as we have heard of today as we've spoken of community, discovery, and individual worth. That poem has helped me chart the quest of my own life, and I leave you with its closing questions today. I have squandered the splendid years that the Lord God gave to my youth in attempting impossible things, deeming them alone worth the toil. Was it folly or grace? Not men shall judge me, but God. But wise men riddle me this. What if the dream come true? What if the dream come true and millions as yet unborn shall dwell in the house that I shaped in my heart, the house of my noble thought? Lord, I have staked my life. I have staked the life of my kin on the truth of your dreadful word. Do not remember my failures, but remember this, my faith. Thank you.
Thank you. Sister Margaret, before we conclude the program, we have a special presentation from the office of New York State Senator Catherine Young. Please welcome to the stage Julie Schmidt, representing Senator Young.
Thank you. As a St. Bonaventure alum, I am truly honored to be here today to present Sister Margaret with the New York State Senate proclamation. For nearly 20 years, Sister Margaret has touched countless lives, sharing with students and faculty her knowledge and passion for a collegiate level education. Sister Margaret has received awards and recognitions for her outstanding work and advocacy, and next week we will be honored by Senator Young as our 2016 New York State Senate Woman of Distinction. This event showcases outstanding women living and working in New York State whose contributions have greatly enriched the quality of life in their communities and beyond. Who better than our own Sister Margaret? You are a testament to a true mentor, leader, and friend. So, on behalf of Senator Young, I would like to present you with this proclamation. Thank you so much.
I have just one thing to say. Take that, Pennsylvania. You gave her up. All right. Thank you, Julie, and thanks to all who are with us today, both on campus and via the live stream. This concludes our program. As you depart the theater, you'll see tables with packages of snacks on them. These are for our students who need to return to their books as they prepare for final exams. That's just a little hint. Which start tomorrow. Yes. Our faculty, staff, and community guests are asked to retire to the Doyle Dining Hall for the reception following this event. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.